What? You need to stay inside the road markings. Keep going, keep going, keep going. What? You need to stay inside the road markings. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Oh, what's wrong? You're doing it again. Look, see the marking? Yeah. Why are you going over there? I want to move to the middle. Well, then you need to check your mirrors and signal. Otherwise, you're going to crash into another car, and they have no idea that you're going to change lane. We're very close to that line still, so just try and keep a lane. Remember Beyonce to the left. Careful, you're about to crash again.
I'm trying to go this way.
Well, then go that way. Yeah. Feel it though. Yeah. Stop. Why aren't you stopping? I'm here. What's he thinking? The policeman was shaking his head. What do you mean? You were going into them. Why?
Could you imagine being a freaking driving instructor and having to deal with teaching women how to drive? Unbelievable. Oh boy. All right. Welcome back, everybody. It's been a while since we did a women driving segment at the beginning of the show. Last week or the week before, we saw Joe McClane in our comments, and I said, hey, Joe, would you like to come on and hang with us? I have been paying attention to Joe for years now. I used to watch his archery videos and a whole bunch of different stuff he was doing, and I was trying to remember where I first started watching it. Joe, did you work for Catholic Answers?
No, I didn't. I did write with Matt Fradd. I was the first chapter of the book called Delivered that Catholic Answers published way back in the day. But I worked, the first Catholic apostolate I worked for full time was an apostolate out of Texas called Fullness of Truth Catholic Evangelization Ministries. Then I spent a decade after that. I worked a decade for the Guadalupe Radio Network, and now I work for the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network out of Buffalo.
Yeah, so you do like a real professional morning radio show, and you started putting it on YouTube now. So I spend a lot of time in my truck, and I'm driving around a lot, so I do catch your show quite often. You guys do a very, very good job over there. It's very professional. It's nothing like this outfit that we're running.
That's funny.
Are you a convert or are you a cradle?
I am. No, I was raised Church of Christ. But I was a pagan heathen for the most part. When I asked my wife to marry me, she said I had to become Catholic, and I knew that wouldn't go over well in my family. But it didn't matter because I was not practicing any Christianity anyway. I was also a third-degree Master Mason at the time, so I went to RCIA and became Catholic in 1999. Got married in 2000, September 30th of the year 2000 in Manchester, New Hampshire. 2 years later, my wife asked for a divorce, and which led to a mystical encounter with Jesus that not only saved my marriage, made it possible for us to have children, praise be to God, but put me on a wild roller coaster ride. So I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that experience. It was pretty amazing.
So wait a minute, I have to dig into that a tiny bit. But wait, Tex Cathetter's in here, and he is a Church of Christ convert too. And I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of Church of Christ converts because they seem to be infiltrators. And I'm only kidding.
It's because we haven't taught you the secret handshake yet, man.
Yeah, I'm only kidding. So wait a minute. So you're married 2 years and your wife asked for a divorce.
Yeah.
And that actually winds up saving your marriage because so was your initial RCIA thing just going through the motions just to become 100%. Catholic?
Yeah. She said I'd become Catholic, and I said, okay, fine, sure, whatever. I mean, I actually did think about it at first because it's a whole, I don't know how much of your life I should waste on the details of the story, but we were actually, I decided to go and do something crazy to ask her to marry me because I wanted to hedge my bet that she would say yes. So there's in Manchester, New Hampshire, there's a place called Rock Remmen, and it's this giant 100-foot face cliff, but the backside, you can climb up the backside of it, and teenagers go up there to smoke weed. It's really the deal. And you can look over the entire city of Manchester. So it was a cool place. And so I carried a oak dining room table up there, and I had set out a red tablecloth with bone white china plates and red candelabra, and
Nick, take notes.
I blindfolded my then girlfriend at the time, and took her up to the top of this Rock Remmen, this mountain. just as the sun was setting over the city. So it was beautiful skies. It was reds and oranges and purples and all that. And all the stoner kids were like, dude, what is going on? I actually killed myself. I mean, literally, I got the scars, blood, sweat, and tears to pay for the ring. I paid cash. It was $3,000. It was 3/4 of a carat of a diamond. And I was so proud of the fact that I was able to buy this ring. I was making peanuts at the time. And so I'm there. She's there, blindfolded. She doesn't know what's going on. I tell her to take off the blindfold, and I'm on my knees with this red leather, or actually it was white leather ring box. And this was 1998. And it had a light inside the ring box, inside the lid. So the light like made the diamond look even bigger than what it was. So I thought, she's never going to know it's only 3/4 of a carat until after we're married, probably. So I'm there. I open the thing up and I say, hey, will you marry me? And she looks over me because I'm on my knees, and she sees the table with the lobster on it. Red lobster, bone white plates, red tablecloth. And she's Portuguese. Her family's from the Azores. She's first generation American. And she says, ooh, lobster. And I'm like, what? Like, excuse me? I'm like, no, will you marry me? She's like, oh, yes, of course. So we're sitting down, and she's like sitting there. I don't know if you've ever hung out with Portuguese people from the Azores, but what they do to shellfish is probably not right. Okay. They do like just sucking things. And I'm just like, I'm from Texas. Okay. If I want lobster, it's deshelled in garlic butter. All right. I don't know what you're doing, but this is weird. Like, so I should have asked that question first, but anyway, she's, sucking things out of the skull of this, mud bug from the ocean. And she says, you're going to have to become Catholic, right? And I was like, wait, what? I'm sorry. Excuse me. Like, we didn't discuss this. Like, we didn't discuss anything, but
how long had you been dating?
I met her in 97. I moved to, I got off the train in Garden Station, Boston in April 1st, 1997. I went and moved with my dad, and I was trying to get into the radio business. I had gone to radio school in Oklahoma. So I sold my car, bought a one-way train ticket to go up to New England, moved into my dad's place in New Hampshire, Southern New Hampshire, and got a job at 2 radio stations in Southern New Hampshire. And I met her through my work in radio, actually, at the time.
What kind of radio were you doing? Were you like the welcome to WBAB and doing like in between radio breaks and stuff? And...
Up 10 spots to number 5. No,
oh my gosh.
No, I wasn't doing that. No, I worked at WNHQ 92.1 in Milford, New Hampshire, and I was the weekend jock there. And then during the week, I would cut spots, commercials, things like that. And then I got a gig doing the morning show on WHOB 106.3 in Nashua. At the time, it was an alternative rock station. So a lot of like Nirvana, stuff like that. And that's where I met her. I was working with her old college friend. And so she started listening to the morning show, and it led to us meeting. And it was kind of a very mystical moment the first time we ever met too. I had a lot of these mystical moments in this journey, but long story short is she asked me to become Catholic, and I thought about it for a minute, and I said, my family's probably going to disown me if I become Catholic, because Church of Christ doesn't really like the Catholic Church. But I said to myself, and this is where I think it was really the real mystical moments along my journey were like moments of clarity. You know how you can lie to yourself all the time? Like you buy your own BS. Like there was these moments where I wasn't buying my own BS anymore. Like this was one of them. Like I said to myself, well, why do you care? Seriously, why do you care? You don't practice Christianity? You don't go to church? Like you live like a pagan heathen. So all roads lead to heaven anyway, right? So why do you care? If that's what she asked, go for it. So it's kind of what I did. So I showed up to RCI class to punch the ticket. I was even kind of confrontational too, because I didn't want anybody to believe I was really bought and sold into it. I was just kind of going through the motions. So I played the whole curmudgeon card, trying to be a contrarian every time we were at RCI class or whatever. So that was kind of my journey. In fact, fun story is the priest who married us, he was an old priest, and he'd been around the block a time or two. So, he kind of knew what we were cohabitating, he knew the deal. He wasn't dumb. And the day of our marriage, September 30th, the year 2000, I'm wearing my kilt because my Scottish heritage. I'm in the back. I'm in the sacristy with the priest, and it's just him and I. And we're like almost ready to go out. Like she's ready to walk down the aisle. We're close. And he turns to me and he says, "Hey, would you like to go to confession?" And I'm like, no. He goes, "In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost." You know?
Good for him. Good for him.
You know, and I was like, I'd only been to confession one other time. That was to check the box just to get, get my Catholic card. So, it was like he was trying to do one last opportunity to get me to the altar in a state of grace. I was addicted to pornography.
Yeah.
We were cohabitating. I was a very selfish person, and he knew that this wasn't going to be a good way to start a marriage. So he was trying his best to get us to the altar, properly. And boy, it was just like a 2x4 across the face.
So I gotta dig into this a tiny bit. So you go through about 2 years of marriage, and things get very dicey, and your wife asks for a divorce. Are you comfortable sharing that mystical experience you had?
Oh, sure. I've done it a billion times. I never know how much to bore people with the details.
What do you mean? This
is better than listening to Anthony. Okay, so
but I also think that people like it's good for us to hear conversion stories once in a while. Like,
sure,
yeah.
So I was addicted to pornography, and when you're addicted to pornography, your brain doesn't work well. In fact, I wrote a book on that. I like I said, I helped write Delivered with Matt Fradd at Catholic Answers, and then I wrote my own book on overcoming pornography and the techniques I use and all of that. And I even wrote a whole chapter on the science of the brain, what happens to the brain when you're addicted to porn. And so you don't see the world correctly. You really have a messed up vision of the people around you, the relationships, all these things. So I was in a bad way. And then I was also, the place I was working, which was not a radio station at the time, my environment was really bad. My peer group was really bad. So I wasn't bringing home love, honor, respect. My wife had caught me using porn a number of times, and I was basically destroying her heart. And then, not long after we bought our house, after we got married, her whole family showed up at my front door and needed a place to live. And then I got very bitter and angry and jaded, and I began to severely disrespect my in-laws, my family. And then the day came where I got laid off, and I didn't even bring home a paycheck. And my wife was done. She was just done. Like, you don't even bring home a paycheck. Like, what good are you? Yeah. And so she's like, I'm done. I'm out of here. I want a divorce. She wrote it out of a piece of paper. You take this, I take that. And then she was gone. And I didn't like the piece you're missing. And actually, I made a whole movie about this. I made a documentary film, released it in 2019 on the Feast of St. Max Colbert, about the father wound. So the piece here is, I grew up with a father wound because my parents were divorced when I was 6. And my dad, I encountered pornography for the first time when I was like 5 years old with my father. And I was chasing my dad's affirmation, my dad's affection, my whole life as a boy, as a teenager growing up, as a young man in the Marine Corps. I was constantly trying to get my father to approve of me, but it was a lot of competition because my dad was always with some new woman. There was always another mom, another like a stepmom, another girlfriend, another something. But so, and when my wife asked for a divorce, it was the first weekend in April of 2002. And the reality was severe. I had actually become a man just like my dad, divorced and broken. And I didn't know what to do about that. So I remember I went and found the Bible, and I don't have it here, but I do still have it. I think it's stored somewhere, but it was, no, actually it's on the shelf right over there. I have the St. Joseph's edition. I don't recommend that translation, by the way, but I had the St. Joseph's edition of the Bible that they gave me in RCIA class. And I took it off and I opened it to the very last place that it had been opened. And that was back in RCIA class. And that was Matthew chapter 5. We were going over the Beatitudes. And the night we went over the Beatitudes from Matthew chapter 5 in RCIA, I had a mystical encounter that night too. When they got to blessed are the pure in spirit, for they shall see God, time stopped for me. Like literally, time stopped. And I had this sort of interior dialogue where I said to myself, wow, I'm addicted to porn. There's no way I'm going to see God. Like, that's impossible. Like, and then I said to myself, I'm a slave to my addiction to pornography. And I said, maybe someday down the road, long time from now, I'll be free, because this is true. And I know that where I am, I'm a slave, and hopefully someday I'll be free. So I was having that kind of a conversation, and time was like still. And that was very extremely weird to me, because again, I was the kind of guy who, I believed my lies. I believed my BS. I believed my game, that I had been playing for so long. And to have these moments of real clear conversation, even just with yourself, let alone, with God, it seems so otherworldly to me. So that was the last time I had opened up the Bible back in our Sunday class. So I pulled it out first weekend in April 2002. I pull it open to the same, and I start reading the Beatitudes, because I didn't really know what else to do, and I get to Matthew chapter 5, and then I start reading, blessed are the pure in spirit. I found myself on my knees, and the words coming out of my mouth. I didn't intend to say them, but they just kind of came out. Lord, I cannot do this. You have to do this. Yeah. And then that was the moment that I had an interior locution. But I got to be honest, it's not like I could see the Lord, but I could feel him better than I can feel like my can of water here. Like it was palpable. But he gave me 3 interior locutions. He exhorted me to purity, that I would be chaste and pure. And I had to go look that up in the dictionary. I didn't know what either of those words really meant, to be honest. I had been addicted to porn since I was a little boy. So for 20 plus years, all I knew of the world was pornography and whatever. So I had to figure that out later. I would be pure. I would be chaste. He also put on my heart that I would fix my marriage, that I had broke it, that I was going to fix it. In fact, he gave me this sort of this vision, this premonition, or however you want to word it. He let me understand, intuitively, he let me understand the passion that I must go through to win my wife's heart back. That there would be a suffering that would be needed, but I was to take it. He made that clear to me, that I was to take it like joining him on the cross. And boy, I can tell you, it was a real suffering afterwards. And then the third thing he really put on my heart was an insatiable hunger and a desire to get to know him. It's really kind of weird and odd to even talk about these sort of interior locution type of things. But so the God of the universe takes time out of his busy schedule to come talk to you. Right. Like you're that special. Right, buddy. But, I didn't know anything about him. I went to Sunday school as a kid in the Church of Christ. I went through RCIA class. So that pretty much makes me a theologian, for crying out loud. But I didn't know this. I didn't know a single thing, not really, about who this person was. So I was like a madman to get to know him. And so I was like every day I'd pick up my Bible and I would read. I read that Bible cover to cover. I would turn on the radio, and this was in New Hampshire, and there was no Catholic radio. All I had was Protestant radio. So I'm like turning it on to hear them preach the word. And if they stopped to talk about the weather, let alone anything else, I would scream at the radio. Like, shut up, you preach. That's all I want to hear is the word of God. And, and again, I didn't know anything about anything, not really. So I remember the first thing I did after that experience was I called my wife and I told her what happened. She immediately curses me out. Now she's first gen Portuguese American, so she knows how to curse like construction workers. Okay, so she chewed me out. She reamed me out really good. But when she was done, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go to church this Sunday. Will you go with me?" She chewed me out again, but that Sunday she went to church with me. Praise be to God.
Yeah.
And it really did save our marriage. I mean, it was hard though. There was years of pain and suffering that we had to go through as a couple, but the other part of that was it set me on a big journey towards the Catholic faith. Even though I was already Catholic, I went to mass because I'm going to go to church this Sunday. Where should I go? Well, I guess I'm Catholic, so I'm going to go to mass. And then I had a neighbor who was a fallen away Catholic. He abandoned the faith and became a Baptist, and he was trying to get me to go to the Baptist church. And I didn't know anything about anything at the time, but I remember just saying to him, I've been to all the Protestant churches as a kid. I grew up, and what I feel in the sanctuary, I know I will not feel at your church. So I said, listen, I don't believe in this Catholic thing, but I'm going to stay put until I know exactly where to go. And so that set me on the journey to figure out where was the truth. And I felt like a guy who stood in the door of the church with his back to the tabernacle, looking out into the world, looking to try to find truth. And the whole time it was over my shoulder. And I just didn't know it at the time. And I was challenged by two people, actually. The first was a man by the name of Alistair Begg. He's
I used to listen. I posted something the other day because he's retiring. He's retiring. Okay.
Oh, so good. Praise God.
He's retiring, stepping down. And I used to listen to him every day. I had a very similar story where I didn't know anything and I just started listening to Protestant radio. I'm listening to, whatever that radio station has.
Hank Kennegraff and the Bible Answer Man and R.C. Sproul and all of them.
I bought R.C. Sproul's book on Romans and stuff.
Sure.
So, man. I was listening to him and then he preached an anti-Catholic sermon one day and I went, whoa, something's wrong here. And it led me to finding Scott Hahn's conversion story. And that was a wrap.
Go. The rest, as they say, is history. Yeah, I actually went to go see David Jeremiah. I loved him. Greg Laurie, all those dudes, all anti-Catholic dudes at that. But at any rate, so Alistair Begg made me Catholic. I got to write that book someday. But I was listening to him preach one day, and he was preaching this anti-Catholic sermon, and he said, he said it with his Scottish accent, of course, but he said, it was Constantine who corrupted the body of Christ. It was Constantine who corrupted the church, brought in all these pagan ideas that became the Catholic Church. And a light bulb went off in my head, and I'm like, oh, all I got to do is go backwards in time. Like, surely the Christians back in the day had something to say. They wrote something, had left something behind that I can go find and read that would, give me some idea about how the earliest Christians thought of scripture or liturgy or mass or worship or anything. So that was the first idea, was to figure out how to find the earliest possible writings. And I made myself a deal because Alistair Begg, really put this seed of doubt in my heart about authority. And so I stopped reading my Bible cover to cover. I was afraid, actually. I was afraid that what I read, I didn't quite understand. By what authority do I say I understand what I'm reading here? Seems like a simple thing, but I had this real crisis in me. So I stopped reading that, and I made myself a deal. I'm going to go find out the earliest possible writings that are not, they have to be written after the Bible and before Constantine was even conceived in his mother's womb. So that time period, I said, I'm going to go read that stuff, figure that part out. And whatever that leads me to, that's what I'm going to go. I don't care if it's in Mecca. I don't care if it's in Salt Lake City. I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to go. So I just went on to, this was before Google, so it was web crawler. I went into web crawler and typed in early Christian writings. And I found a website that said earlychristianwritings.com, which still exists today. Yeah. It's a Protestant site. And they have a chronological list of all these documents, which they think are chronological based on the average assumptions of their Protestant theologians. So, but they're all there. And I just said, okay, let's start at the beginning. And I started with the Didache. I never heard of the Didache before. So I started reading the Didache. And, it talks about the way of light, the way of darkness, the way of life, the way of death. Talks about things like baptism, for instance. Oh, I'm like, oh yeah, full immersion, baby. That's how they did it. Oh, wait, I can have any amount of water. I don't have to be immersed as long as it's poured 3 times in the Trinitarian formula. Man, that sounds awfully Catholic. Whatever. And then they talked about, like, you have to go to confession before receiving communion on Sundays. What? Like that's we're okay. We're gonna move on to the next one. Ignatius of Antioch, he's the first one to use the word Catholic to describe the church. And of course, he talks about the flesh of Christ. He mentions the Blessed Mother. I mean, it just goes on and on. The Shepherd of Hermes, Clement of Rome. I mean, I just read all this stuff. Justin the Martyr. And then you get to Tertullian. You read the flesh of Christ. It's a sledgehammer to Protestantism, well before Protestantism was a thing. And by the time I got through that, I was very convinced that the early church was definitely not Protestant, very Catholic. But while that was happening, I had another lady challenge me from our parish, and because she could see things were not great in our marriage, and we're, at church, she could see we were on a journey. So she shows up and comes over to our house one day, and she's trying to get to know us, and she hands me a tape set, cassette tapes. I'm old, so it was cassette tapes back in the day. And it was a set by a man by the name of Dr. Scott Hahn. I never heard of him before. And it was calling all Bible Christians to be Catholic and vice versa. And I listened to it, and it was my first exposure to Catholic apologetics. It was the first time I heard any responses to all of the anti-Catholic, stuff that you hear all the time. And I was blown away by that. So of course I picked up his book and read Rome Sweet Home. And then in fact, I have this book right here. I keep it handy all the time because I'm leading a Bible study off of it. It's arguably my favorite Scott Hahn book of all time, which is A Father Who Keeps His Promises. I love it because it's the watered down version of his doctoral thesis, which I also have, which is this thick and way over my head. But this, a knucklehead can understand this. This is super sweet, super easy. And it gives you that 60,000 foot view of sacred scripture. So it all makes sense. And I read that, and that exposed me to typology for the first time. And then first comes love. And then that exposed me to the family of God. So the sisters and brothers and the saints that go before us, the role of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and of course, Hail Holy Queen, all those things. And my mind was blown. And I remember the day I gave my heart to the Catholic Church. I had done a study of John chapter 6 in the original Greek. Okay, because I have to be, I couldn't trust my translation. So I simply looked up a tool, translated every word. And then I said to myself, wow, my translation's pretty good, actually. Maybe next time I'll just trust my translation. But anyway, I remember thinking to myself, Jesus was being very literal here. Greek word sarx, the Greek word trogon, hunk of dripping bloody meat, chewing, gnawing, tearing. It's like he's not being symbolic in any way. And then, of course, they all leave him and abandon him over that particular teaching. And St. Peter says, where else are we to go? You alone have the words of life. So I was convinced, I was done, but I still struggle with the Pope. I still struggle with the Blessed Virgin Mary and the role of the intercession of the saints. But I said, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. You're going to have to help me with all this other stuff, but I'm on board, help me go. And then it actually kicked off a war with my father, which forced me to study my faith even harder because, it was an apologetics war, which lasted for many, many years. So that's the nutshell version of my journey anyway.
So now you're working for which radio station you work for now?
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network based out of Buffalo, New York.
Now, how do they approach the way you're handling the current situation? Because I don't think Relevant Radio lets their hosts step out too much. I don't think there's a lot of,
I spent 10 years at the Guadalupe Radio Network. So I know exactly what the industry is like. In fact, for the longest time, I thought the pinnacle of my career success will be to work, at EWTN. Yeah. God love EWTN. I don't want to be too critical of EWTN. There's some great things I can still say about what they're doing today, but I can also tell you that I won't be working for EWTN at this point. That my goals changed, but for me, I spent a decade. I started the Catholic radio station in my neck of the woods here in Houston, Texas, back in 2013. And, you have to play nice with everybody, right? So you have to be Mr. Catholic radio guy for a city of 7 million people. And I'm working 7 days a week. I'm in parishes doing, announcements at masses. I'm at events. I'm emceeing galas everywhere, all over the town. And you wear yourself thin and you want to be everybody's best friend. So everybody will help you spread the word about your radio station so we can raise the money we need to operate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, while you're doing that, I emceed. I can't tell you how many sister pantsuit galas I emceed, and they're all like 90 years old. And it was just, and I'm just sitting here just wondering, what am I doing? Man, at some points, if I have to hang out with one more permanent deacon with his centering prayer apostolate, oh my heavens, I can't. I can't.
When did it break for you? When does that? Because man, people don't realize.
Of 2018 is the
because people don't realize before McCarrick, it's like the Catholic speaking circuit is this tight-knit community. It's like you see the same speakers going around, and then a couple of people decided to step out of line and they kind of get pushed out. It's like, we can't talk to this guy anymore. We can't talk to this guy anymore.
Our Catholic world is so cliquey. It's it's pathetic how cliquey it is. And I've never truly fit in any of those cliques. So I've always been on the outskirts. You know, I started podcasting in 2006, 2005. I was creating Catholic podcasts back in the day. And I've always just been on the periphery of all of these cliques because I never quite fit in. I didn't go to Steubenville, so I don't fit into that. I'm not a net guy. I didn't belong to the Catholic apostolate on the college campus or any of these things. So I never quite got along with anybody. But for me, what really changed it was summer of 2018. It was McCarrick. One thing I didn't share earlier was the bishop who confirmed me at Easter Vigil 1999. He was a bishop under cardinal law. He was the vicar general in the Archdiocese of Boston under cardinal law. He admitted in court his guilt that he was moving around homosexual priests to hide them. And they were abusing more and more young men. We want to talk about children. It's post-pubescent males, by and large, of the victims. So we're talking a homosexual problem here. And that bishop admitted his guilt in court and refused to resign even after that. He's like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. He refused. So I didn't really know that when he confirmed to me. And it was like after the whole thing broke in 2001, I read it in the newspaper and I'm like, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
You've got to be kidding me. And then, of course, you will all remember 2004, the Dallas Accords. Cardinal McCarrick promised us, him and Cardinal Gregory, who's the prelate in DC today. Yeah. He was sitting right next to McCarrick, the two besties.
They send the chief predator in. The chief predator, they send up there.
The wolf in the hen house saying, hey, guys, don't you worry. We're going to take care of the hens. Don't you worry. And it's because of Cardinal McCarrick that I got to go now to get certified with their safe environment thing because Cardinal McCarrick set it up. Which also helps to train people how to do the crime.
Exactly.
Let that sink in. But anyway, so I wanted to believe that the Catholic Church was going to clean its house and repent of its sins, make good, move on. And this issue has been dealt with. And then, of course, you start to hear more stories and you start to see things. But you don't want to be like, listen, I can't rock the boat, man. It's career suicide. I represent an organization that has to play nice with bishops, and I want to get along with all my friends around town, so you just. But then Cardinal McCarrick, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I'm going to die. I'm going to go to my judge, and I'm going to have to give an account for what I did with not only my microphone, but was I willing to stand up for truth, let the chips fall where they may, even if that meant I got, excommunicated from my job and from my community and my friends and all the rest. I'm like, I have to give an account. I can't do this anymore. So that was the day that was like that. That was the time that really changed for me. And I just said, I will no longer pretend as though there's not a massive, huge problem in Holy Mother Church that needs to be called out. So I just started doing that. And there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes at my apostle at the time. And I was rising in the ranks at the network. And I started doing a morning show for them as well. And then I started to have conversations that were difficult and that upset some people. And so people are calling to complain. Some people stopped donating, and it became really touch and go. But to be honest with you, that's not what the deal breaker was. Not really. The deal breaker was when I started sharing about my love for the traditional Latin Mass and growing I didn't start that way. Trust me. I had a real difficult time with the Latin Mass to begin with, but it grows on you. And once it's got a hold of you, you start to appreciate more and more the intentionality of the liturgy, the sacredness of the liturgy, the sacrificial nature of the liturgy. And I decided that I wasn't going to avoid it simply because there were people in the room who didn't go to the traditional Latin Mass, right? Like I'm not going to not talk about what I love just because you're in the room. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. So that was getting me in trouble more and more. I tried to work those differences out. I tried to hang on, but ultimately I knew that if I continued to do what I did at that apostolate, I would end up ruining that apostolate. And that did not sit well with me because there was many people on my team who weren't on the same page with me. Were they willing to take the same risks I was? No, they weren't. And I didn't feel comfortable with that. So I resigned so that I could pursue my conscience and let them do whatever they were going to do. And then the Station of the Cross, we are well suited for each other. Station of the Cross has been bold and courageous now for years, praise be to God, because they've seen the writing on the wall for a long time. Jim Wright, who and his wife Joanne, who founded it 25 years ago, they're pull no punches kind of Catholics. They're tried Catholics, and they know that the world's getting worse, not better. They see all the scandals in the church. They're from Buffalo, for crying out loud. You know how many scandals are in Buffalo? They just sold a church to the Muslims. They're going to sell a seminary to the Freemasons. So it's like enough is enough, and that's where they're at. It was a perfect fit for me in that way. So I was able to come on board and do the morning show for them, and it's been growing ever since.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, like even the fact that you'll have a guy like Anthony Stein on, Stein's he's pretty bold in the things he comes out.
I love Anthony Stein. He's fantastic.
Oh, me too. I talk to him all the time.
Who else? Like I've had crazy conversations that I would never be able to have in a million years. Ed Mazza has been on the show.
Yeah.
Like Anthony Stein. I've had a ton of people that there'd be no way of having those same conversations anywhere else in Catholic radio. Not really. Virgin most powerful, but they don't own any radio stations. So they're content creators. They're not content distributors. Whereas like we own a radio network of 20 stations across all of the Northeast. So, it's a different set of risks and a different ball game. But I've had so many great and crazy conversations that I'm like, I've even had them like been going, I don't even know how this is going to go. If I am still employed after this, I will give God praise. And it always seems to work out. So I'm very, very grateful.
Because even this nonsense we're looking at right now. So now we'll get to the show topic. What we're gonna do on locals tonight. Me and Nick, I put a couple of clips of Matt Fradd and Trent Horn in the show thing that we have. So we're gonna go over those because Trent is on his fundamentalist Catholic thing right now, and I want to critique a little bit of what he said. And then we might get into the longshoreman thing a little bit. Me and Rob are having a bit of a disagreement. This might be the next.
They suspended. Argument. You hear they suspended?
They did, yeah.
Yeah, praise be to God.
Yeah, that's that. So we might discuss that a little bit. That'll be over on locals. But Rob, why don't we play the Tuco clip of him inventing these new sins that we all need to confess, and let's just take a look at this and see what fun we're having with this synod, because I honestly think we are going to end up I'll be honest, I was actually surprised that they dropped that little statement about no female deacons, because usually what they've been doing since Tuco is in is nothing happens at the synod, but they drop a document right before from the DDF and one right after. So like last time we got the same-sex blessings one was closer to Christmas, but we got another one it was just like the stuff that you thought they were going to do in the synod, they just did in the document before the synod. So the synod had no,
Did you see the group, Study Group 5's summation of their conversation about this?
No.
I read it on my show this morning. They're leaving the door wide open for female deacons.
Of course they are. Yeah. They come out and they make a statement saying, no, Francis, his heart on it. There's no room for it, but keep studying it. We're going to keep the door wide open.
Yes, exactly. And just light a candle, just pray about it. It's going to be fine.
But these sins that they're bringing up are actually like an affront to reason, and like let's just listen to what they have to say, because it's so preposterous.
Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, Prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. I ask forgiveness, feeling shame for all the times that in the Church, especially us pastors who are entrusted with the task of confirming our brothers and sisters in the faith, have not been able to guard and propose the gospel as a living source of eternal newness, indoctrinating it and risking reducing it to a pile of dead stones to be thrown at others. I beg forgiveness, feeling shame for all the times we have given doctrinal justification to inhuman treatment. I ask forgiveness, feeling shame for when we have not been credible witnesses of the fact that the truth is free. or when we have obstructed the various legitimate enculturations of the truth of Jesus Christ, who always travels the paths of history and life, to be found by those who want to follow him with fidelity and joy. I ask forgiveness, feeling shame for the actions and omissions that have been prevented and still make it difficult the recomposition in unity of the Christian faith and the authentic fraternity of all mankind. Forgive us, Lord.
I think that's it. I think that's it for his. The idea that they're having this fake penitential service, and instead of getting up and saying, we ask forgiveness for allowing homosexuality to run rampant in our clergy, for allowing us to, we ask forgiveness for not passing on the faith to the next generation. Like the things they've actually done wrong, they make up this nonsense that
asking forgiveness for closing our parishes during
COVID.
Yeah, like absolutely, that they didn't ask forgiveness for taking the sacraments away during that freaking that big ordeal.
Crypto, my man.
Ducat is the man.
I want to know what Crypto does for work. I'm just like, bro.
We may be having a meeting with him soon, but yeah, Nick, why don't you have at this one, because I haven't let you talk much this episode.
Well, really, just what I was looking at is all of those statements. You know, the first one I can maybe give a little bit of a pass on, but the rest of them are just ambiguous. They don't make any sense. They can be interpreted in all kinds of ways, but they get worse and worse. So whenever you see the buzzwords about human fraternity at the end, and also the statement about, you know, not being good about like having good Christian unity, I assume what that's referring to is some type of ecumenical gesture on the Catholic Church not being one with other quote Christian denominations. But this again goes to show me that they have a fundamental lack of understanding of just basic Catholic ecclesiology. Pius XI is explicitly clear in Mortali Animos, his document against ecumenism, where he explicitly states that the prayer of our Lord in the Garden of Gethsemane, Lord, may they all be one, is fulfilled in the Catholic Church. And the unity of faith and the unity of charity is fulfilled in the Catholic Church. So there is, of course, a good desire that we should have for all people to come to the church, but it's the ecumenism of return. You've split from the church, you need to come back. It's not this unity of we sinned against you, you sinned against us, and now the church is kind of split here, there, and everywhere, and maybe one day we can kind of come together. When you put that along with this human fraternity nonsense, which again, it rings of Freemasonry there, it's very, very concerning. So I think what viewers need to do is say, how are we supposed to look at this synod? And I always tell people, look at it through the lens of politics, secular politics. These individuals know that it's not, you know, a bunch of tratty YouTubers that are really going to get their gumption rolling. It's going to be political leaders in Europe, political leaders in the United States, who are going to be wanting them to promote these messages. We saw somewhere, we saw it was posted on Twitter, but I think it was like the Belgian president, something like that. It was one of the leaders of the Northern European nations who called out Pope Francis and said that he's wanting to have a private meeting with Pope Francis to apparently chastise him for Pope Francis's recent comments on abortion, saying that abortion is murder. And that's what I've said a long time. If the Catholic Church actually starts to really be public about her beliefs, eventually you're going to have the UN that comes in and just slaps it down, say, get back in your place.
Yeah.
I mean, what we just saw Tuco do, I mean, that's just a Marxist struggle session. You know, if you look at Mao or Jim Jones and the People Temple, if you've ever listened to those tapes from Jim Jones, this is what they did in those meetings in the middle of the night. They would confess all their supposed socialist sins to each other.
Yeah. The other thing I like to say too is, you know, I believe it's my firm opinion that Pope Francis and I'll just put Fernandez on the same ticket here. The Francis Fernandez ticket. They like to ride the line of heterodoxy, orthodoxy as closely as they possibly can without crossing over it. I know there's a lot of people who disagree with that. They think they crossed over it, but my opinion is, I don't think Pope Francis is dumb. I think he's a pretty smart guy. And I think he's very, very astute politically, as you just said, Nicholas. And I think he rides that line knowing that as the Supreme Pontiff, He can't cross that line. He's got to get as close as he can, though, and just let people think he has, because he also knows that there's lots of people, bishops, cardinals, priests, and lay folk in the church that would happily take the ball from him and cross that line all day, every day. And hey, who am I to judge, right? So it becomes this ambiguous, loosey-goosey thing. And when you make statements like turning doctrine into stones to hurl at people, well, there's a huge section of Holy Mother Church, the body of Christ, who are going to interpret that, as, oh, well, then all doctrine is then optional, because we don't want to hurl any stones now. And there just won't be this clarification and this the language of ambiguity and vagueness. It's very fascinating, because I'm going through St. Hildegard's 5 Beasts right now to prepare to, I'm doing like a whole series on the Antichrist on my YouTube channel. So I'm doing the next installment is going to be on Hildegard's 5 Beasts. And you get to the gray wolf. I mean, the black pig era of her vision talks about leaders who corrupt, right? And then the gray wolf live in the ambiguity. The gray wolf era, which is the era right before the Antichrist, lives in the ambiguity. What does it really mean? Who knows? Who knows? Because that's part of the scandal to lead the world towards greater corruption. But it also says in that vision that this is going to be a time that's going to test like fire the faithful, and a small remnant will come from it. And it's that remnant that is now prepared, like Gideon's army that's been culled down to the only 300. That's the army that's going to face the Antichrist in the final tribulation. And if you didn't prepare them through fire and persecution, they would never be ready for the real deal, for the game with the Antichrist. So I feel like we're probably on the precipice of that. I hate to say that, but I believe that's where we're at, because you see this strategy of ambiguity. Just it's an everyday occurrence at the Vatican these days, and the gobbledygook language of oh, my feelings are so surreal. I'm just like, oh my heavens, man, put down the blunt, step back and take a breather.
It's at a point where, well, the thing is, I think we've been so desensitized to Francis over the last 10 years that, like, so when that first initial thing with McCarrick happens in 2018, I think we all had this apocalyptic imagery in our heads. We were all talking about the third secret of Fatima that wasn't talked about, and we were all going through this thinking we were on the precipice of something coming. And then we go through that 2020 ordeal and we're like, holy cow. And I think we've been desensitized the last 4 years specifically to kind of get lulled into this feeling of nothing ever happens. But I really do think we're on something's about to happen. And it's about to happen in the secular world and in the church at the same time. So I don't know if it's going to coincide with Francis passing and secular society collapsing at the same time. But I do wonder, because we will be fooled, right? So whatever's going to come is not going to be so simple to know, like, oh, well, this is the way to go. Like, I really do think even the elect may be fooled. So it's a tricky thing to make sure you don't fall for the wrong thing. Like, you see this whole dynamic between the Pope splainers versus the trads. And it's like, the Pope splainers are just doing their best to stay loyal to the Pope, because that's what it's always been. You stay in communion with the bishops and the popes. But when the things that are coming out of the Vatican are so insane right now,
right?
Like, you have to understand people's reticence to accept that and just say, wait a minute, there's something so completely off with this right now. Francis does not care about theology. He cares about power. He uses ambiguity to move the pieces on the chessboard for his own purpose. He's not really an ideologue, but uses ideologues for his purposes. Well, what I worry the most about is that what he's done by elevating certain people is assure the chaos continues after he's gone. Like, I don't know how we get out of this mess with the fiasco he's caused in person.
Well, that's interesting too, because last year I did a documentary film on the end times, and I went to Rome, and I was traveling around Rome, but I interviewed a bunch of people. And one of the people I interviewed was Edward Penton, and he's done some fantastic reporting.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's one of the bright spots at EWTN. I say, they're still doing some really great work. Edward Penton, I was asking him, because he wrote a book on the potential candidates for the next pontificate. And I asked him, I said, what do you think? You've written that book. Do you want to revise your book? I mean, you got a lot of new cardinals now. What are you thinking? And he said something very interesting. He said, you're going to be surprised, I think, in the next conclave. Yes, Francis has stacked the deck. There's no question. He says, but a lot of these men do not have the stomach for the chaos and for the drama that Francis, Tucho, and the rest that they have. They love the drama, right? They're drama queens. But there's a lot of these men that they're picked, and yeah, they're more liberal or whatever, but they're not
They're
truly
functionaries.
They're functionaries. They're not truly on board. So he says it's quite possible that you're going to get a guy who is in that category, but as soon as he becomes Pope, he's going to fall more towards the middle, and he's going to want to calm things down and just have some peace again. And he says you might find a very interesting next pontificate if that's the case. And certainly, I would say if you get like a Pizzaballa, I could totally see a decent pontificate out of Cardinal Pizzaballa if that might be possible. If you get a Tagley, nope, sorry, Tagley, I think would be bad news for Holy Mother Church. So it all depends. At the end of the day, I guess my opinion and a nickel get you just about nowhere. So I guess we're gonna have to, like Nancy Pelosi says, pass it to find out what's in it. But and I always come back to, and this is the spoiler for my documentary film, so you don't have to bother watching it, is live in a state of grace, pursue virtue, be obedient to your state and life, and it will not matter what comes out of the Vatican, and it won't matter who sits in the White House, because you will be doing the thing that you're supposed to do. And at the end of the day, I think Catholics need to remember that. We can't, it's not charitable to pretend as though everything the Pope says is okay, when you know very well it's not.
Yeah.
Like, it's not charitable to spin everything into this most positive, thing so that less informed Catholics will just buy it hook, line, and sinker, and then they're misled. How is that charity? That's not charity.
No, and also the news headlines that come out are pitting it so that the average person watching isn't actually paying attention. Like, we're church nerds. Like, we pay attention to this stuff, right? So we're like in the know, but your average person only sees the headlines that are coming out of the Wall Street Journal or whatever.
Or TikTok.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. Right. So they're all hearing, oh, Francis is allowing gay blessings now. They're all hearing this liberalization of the church from the mainstream press, because that's what they're reporting on. But there is still a segment of people who are converted by hard truths, right? Like those doctrinal stones he's talking about throwing. There are so many people who came into the church specifically for those doctrinal stones, because those hard truths God uses as a 2x4 upside the side of our heads sometimes to wake us up from our sleep. And I mean, I've talked about it before. It was like the teaching on birth control is what convinced me that the church was what it claimed to be. It's like all these other denominations are falling left and right, and the only one who kept its teaching on this, because when you really play out the ramifications of birth control, it leads to the collapse of society, which it absolutely did. I mean, feminism just completely destroyed the culture that we're in, and it all comes down to that stupid bill. So these doctrinal stones they're talking about throwing are the very things that will actually lead that remnant eventually. They'll procure that remnant.
I think when the heat gets turned up on Holy Mother Church, I think most are going to abandon the faith. I mean, how many Catholics are really going to want to die for the faith, or even like lose their job for the faith? I mean, it doesn't have to go to bloodshed before people are like, you know what, I'm out. Like right now, there's a lot of people who are leaving just because they see the scandals in the church and they've had enough of it, and they don't want the drama. And to be honest, they really want more of this world than they cared to admit. All they really want is blue skies, sunshine, money in their back pocket, and they want their kids to go to a great school, get great jobs, be in debt up to their eyeballs with mortgages and second car loans, and have a beautiful spouse, good kids, living in great neighborhoods. That's the extent of their dreams. And as long as that's true, I can tell you the apostasy won't take much to actually happen.
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of good points. I think that to touch upon a question that you posed on how close does Pope Francis get to the line, it was something I addressed in a recent show that I did, where I said that I would agree with that statement 98% of the time. I would say 98% of the time he does mess around with ambiguity. And as a great archbishop of the last century said, whose name will go unnamed, you guys know who I'm talking about, he said that the devil hides in ambiguity. And it was perfect, because the Spirit of God, of course, is going to speak truth. He's not going to be ambiguous. And so I think that Pope Francis dabbles in ambiguity because, politically speaking, that's a smart idea for a politician. But I also think that Pope Francis wants to leave some type of lasting legacy on the church. And we've seen this, of course, through primarily the documents that have been released, a lot of times which reflect ambiguity, but have enough ambiguity to where we see large swaths of the liberal quote unquote church going ahead and performing, for instance, things like gay blessings. You see these things going on, they're going on unperturbed, nothing's being done about it, etc. We see things like that. But then also with this last statement, where Pope Francis has, I guess, tripled down, where he says that all religions lead to God and that the Holy Ghost, in some form or fashion, right, divinely inspires these religions, which, by the way, those statements are not new to Pope Francis. You can find those statements in John Paul II. You can find those statements in Benedict. The internet was just not a thing back in the 80s, and so that's why, unless you were at a society chapel, you just didn't hear about those things. So we've seen these things come out, but they've pushed the line to the point where it becomes ludicrous to assume, as I said on my show, that Pope Francis is just so unexposed to Catholicism that he just doesn't happen to know that Christianity is the unique religion of God. You know what I'm saying? That he would have to either be just completely bewildered, or he knows what he's doing and he's pushing the line. So I think that what we are seeing is, particularly in these last couple statements, Pope Francis knows that his time is going to be short. He's going to turn 88 in December, and he's looking for a legacy that he has to live. And through people like Fernandez saying these statements about doctrinal stones, all that does is, number one, weaken doctrine in the face of the public who's paying attention, which is sad, by the way, because Vatican I is explicit that the role of the papacy is to safeguard the Catholic faith. They use the term pure, to keep the Catholic faith pure and to give the gospel to the world. But then also, it only applies to that leftist wing, that leftist cause. So what I think we're seeing is that through Fernandez, we are going to see some type of legacy building. We're in the last stages of the pontificate, and we're seeing the legacy built at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder how that's going to play out. Rob, pull up that Catholic World Report article I put in, and because it talks about the silliness of the lack of transparency at this synod. I'm trying to get it to come up on my phone, and I can't get it to come up. Let's see if we could. Yeah, can you put it up on screen? Let's see. Try to make it a little bigger for me because I can't get it to come up on my stupid phone. All right, let's see. All right, so now we run into a gag rule imposed on the synod participants by its managers in order to guarantee freedom of expression. Like, it's just so silly. They're not allowed to discuss what they're discussing, but this is supposed to be transparency. So participants at the synod spent 2 days before the start of its final session in a closed retreat that ended with a penitential liturgy. The synod office provided the participants with a list of 7 sins. So we go from the 7 deadly sins to these 7 new sins for which forgiveness would be sought. It did not say who would be doing the forgiving. To put it bluntly, all this struck me as a rather odd way to launch a meeting. Consider a couple of sins on that list: sin against peace, sin against creation, against indigenous populations, against migrants, sin against poverty. So right off the bat, let's go with this, because the whole thing with migration is, I think it's one of the most diabolical things that Francis has done through his papacy. This idea that we need to open our borders to cultures that are foreign to the Christian West. It is the very thing that is going to bring the chastisement upon Christian Europe. So you open the gates and you encourage the leaders of these nations to do it, bring these people into the country, and they are going to be, you saw what is going on in France. I saw, Joe, on your show this morning, you talked about the church in France got smeared with feces, like the things that they are doing to Christian Europe. The chastisement in Europe is going to be biblical, because the faith is Europe. So the fact that they have turned their back completely on God and allowed the hordes of the non-believers in and to change their society like that, it's going to be similar to what God does with the Assyrians in Israel, where he allows the Assyrians to come in and just completely destroy Israel at that time.
Yeah, it is. I would say it's already biblical over there. There are some bright spots, though. I mean, France, there seems to be a great movement towards some fidelity by some in the church. Praise be to God. Of course, the one pilgrimage that happens every year is growing leaps and bounds. The people from all over the world are going to that. That's certainly good news. But it's more negative news than anything. Everybody thinks of Poland as really good, but Poland's not far behind Ireland. Not really.
Yeah.
I would say Hungary is probably better off than Poland these days when it comes to the faith. So, you know, the reality is we're in a post-Christendom era. And I say this a lot too. You know, Fulton Sheen, God love him. I'm a fan of Fulton Sheen, despite, you know, some of the things he said towards the end. He would talk about the era of the laity. I'm not on board with the whole era of the laity. Sorry, guys. We have a role. There's no question. We have a role. We have to play that role. We have to be obedient to that role. There's no question. We got to step up. But I do not believe for one second that if me and every other lay guy steps up, that we're going to truly impact the world in the way that it's meant to be impacted, because it's not our job. It's not our role. What it is, it belongs to the bishops. Exactly. You know, the Pope, the cardinals, the bishops. And I believe that there is a number of bishops. I've known Bishop Strickland since before he was bishop. In fact, the first time I ever met him, he was still Monsignor, and I could see the deer in the headlight look in his eyes because he had just been, you know, told, hey, you're going to be the bishop. Yeah. And that experience literally changed the rest of his life, as we all know. But my point is, I believe that there is a number of men who are what I call fence setters. You know, they're in the gray zone. They're living this life in the ambiguity. They're administrators, they're corporate CEOs, they're priests or branch managers. And they are living this life because that's the way they were trained. And they were told, if you want a career, you go along to get along and you just do it. And so that's what they've been doing. And frankly, they were trained that. And it still is this way today in seminaries. You can get a good, solid, Orthodox, dare I say, conservative or even traditional young man to go to the seminary, and they're going to spit out a corporate machine of a priest. And the problem is we have all these fence sitters. And I believe that if we can fan the flame of a few of these bishops to get off that fence, to make a decision, to be zealous instead of lukewarm, instead of cold, but to be zealous for the faith, to become the next Strickland. They don't have to be deep theologians. They don't have to be the greatest thinker in mind of their time, or a preacher like Fulton Sheen was. They just need to be faithful. And what I've said now for years, because I've had a unique perspective, having been somebody who's, you know, been, you know, the most connected Catholic in a diocese before, and I've known all the rich folks before. They don't take my calls anymore. But anyway, I said to this one guy who was, you know, multi-millionaire. I mean, probably hundreds of millions of dollars in his net wealth. I don't know, but he was a very rich man. And I said to him one night, I said, you know how we're going to get the cardinal to change? He goes, how's that? I said, you're going to tell him. Why? Why would I do that? I said, because you're the only one he's going to listen to. Yeah. I said, when I talk to him, who am I? I'm the knucklehead Catholic radio guy. I'm a nobody. He's never going to listen to me. I did try once, by the way. I said, but you're the biggest donor in town. He will listen to. If you encourage him to be courageous, to get off that fence and to stand for something, he may just do it because you asked him to. And I believe that if we can motivate, if we ever get a chance, if the Holy Ghost ever gives us an opportunity to plant a seed of encouragement in the heart of a bishop, we should never fail to take that opportunity. And we should encourage them. Get off the fence, because you might have a guy that you might criticize today, but tomorrow might be another Bishop Strickland and might proclaim truth, despite the fact that it might get him fired or worse. And I think when we do that, if we can move more bishops off the fence, you will start to see change. Only when the bishops decide to convert every soul, not some souls. You know, the Jewish souls need conversion. The Muslims, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the atheists, all of the souls have to be converted in their diocese, not just some of them. And when they decide to do that, you will see, in fact, great change, in my opinion.
1000%.
Yeah, you saw it go the other way too with some bishops, where like Schoenborn, we thought was a good guy
back in the day. Yeah,
you thought he was a good guy. Then Francis comes out, and you saw the pride flag fly with this guy. It was crazy. It was shocking to watch his transformation. You know, and it's I think that if real persecution comes, I think you'll see men that may seem like fence sitters now choose a side, you know, and that's kind of, look, we went to the Catholic Identity Conference last weekend. I did. And there was a Nigerian bishop that spoke there. And one thing he talked about, his whole talk was about persecution of Nigerian Catholics. And he talked about how the Muslims would come in and they would just murder people, blow up a church, people would be dying. And he ended by telling us, but you want to know something? The mass attendance for Nigerian Catholics is 94%. And the reason it's 94% is because they're being persecuted. And the reason it's 17% in the US is because we have it so freaking easy. But if anything actually does come where even, look, like you said, if you might get a middle of the road pope next who doesn't have the courage to continue on the revolution like that's been going on. But all of a sudden, if the world turns on him, you may see a St. Thomas More moment, or you may see a guy go from being milquetoast to saying no. God forges us in that fire at times. So
I would agree. Yeah, it's quite possible. We do live in interesting times. The good news is it's not boring. Praise be to God.
Yeah, no, and also you have to really think of the perspective of the guys who started the traditional movement. These guys were having mass in the basement, and there was 12 people there.
Yeah,
I went to that conference last week, and there was 800 people there. We're talking about people that are flocking to the traditional mass because they're seeking out the traditional faith. They see they're not being taught they're not being taught the faith in their local parishes, so they're seeking out somewhere to go that's Orthodox.
Yeah.
There is no era of the laity, and there is no new springtime. In regards to the laity are primarily meant to live their faith through their family and secular channels, i.e. community and workplace. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That is interesting that you brought that up. The other thing is, I saw you put up an old clip with Joshua Charles recently, and Josh and I, Josh, a good friend of mine. We talk regularly. But his whole thesis on as Christianity spreads with the demons being held back by God during that period, and how they're being loosed on the earth right now. I mean, I don't see how anybody could not see it that way. The things that are popping up, the way things are playing out in society around us.
Sure.
You just see this loosening of spirits, and people actually going to subconsciously worship in the way they did when these demons were actually worshiped, but they don't even realize that's what they're doing.
I mean, how much anecdotal evidence does one need to know things are really ramped? I mean, when I was a kid, I'm 50. So when I was a kid, grew up in the 80s, of course, born in the 70s. And, homosexuality was a thing. And of course, there were, MTV had lots of guys wearing makeup with weird hair.
Yeah.
But homosexuality was still a very, very minor part of society, incredibly minor. Fast forward only 30 years, and the pride parades are off the hook, and all of a sudden everybody's gay. You're gay, I'm gay, everybody's gay. It's like it's transgender ideology, library time. I mean, we're living in absolute bizarre times. And then, of course, talk to an exorcist. Ask any exorcist you want. Hey, listen, don't even go ask Father Ripperger because he's too darn trad for you, right? Go ask some other exorcist. There's lots to go around that are just Novus Ordo exorcists. Ask them. They will all tell you that everything is like a hockey stick chart. It's just skyrocket all the way. Yeah. So, I mean, we're on the brink of war all the time now. I mean, as a kid, we were still doing the Cold War thing. So we would have, nuclear drills in school. Like, they're going to have to bring that back now because we're always on the brink of war. If Iran, figures out how to break the Iron Dome over Israel, it's on, boys. The Russia's going to team up with China and Iran on one side, and we're all going to be in the other side. And we know once you get dressed up for a party, you got to dance. Nobody goes home until they dance. And the war hawks won't be happy until the blood runs and their banks fill. And they always get rich in war. And that's because we're always on this brink. And of course, the next pandemic or all this, it's like we live in such insane, crazy times. Now, look what happened, post-hurricane. Complete devastation. Volunteers are being threatened to be arrested, and supplies and money's being confiscated, and there's not enough money in FEMA's account because they gave it to the illegal immigrant crisis that we're also dealing with. Listen, I lived through Harvey. My neighborhood flooded. I had people from Tennessee in their boat in my front yard to try to rescue us back in during Harvey. So I can appreciate what it's like to have volunteers come, and they're threatening to arrest them. Like, this is the bizarre world. Upside down world. Put a mask on by yourself in a car. What?
We forget what we've been. We're all we all have PTSD,
if you can't come to the conclusion, I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. you know, you don't have to be a prophet to come to a conclusion that says, no, the water's boiling. Some shoe is going to drop at some point. You know, St. Augustine, he was really, in his book, The City of God, which I got behind me over here. I think it's in the 3rd book. I want to say it's around, I think he even makes a statement in the 1st chapter of that book, where he talks about almost like a criticism, like, oh, you don't believe that's actually going to happen, that the world will come to an end, that the Antichrist will show up and there'll be a persecution. Well, stick around. You're going to find out the hard way then. Yeah. Like my paraphrase of his words, but he was criticizing the Christians who were like, oh, it's never going to happen. You guys always say it's the end of the world and it never is going to happen. And Augustine's like, it's going to happen. And you need to be ready for when and if it does happen during your lifetime. So there's so many crazy things. And for anybody to be like, oh, it's just the end of the world, sky's falling stuff. I'm like, are you kidding me? They're hoarding toilet paper right now because of Anthony's buddies, longshoremen, who just obviously want to get a massive pay raise out of this deal. I'm stirring the pot because
let's start it. All right, so listen,
we're tweets passing earlier today.
we're gonna go over the locals and we're gonna get into some stuff because I want to see Joe's opinion on how Trent is handling his new book on fundamentalism, because it's a strange thing that this, I like Trent. Trent's my friend, but he does a lot of this weird fence sitting thing too. And
dude, it's 1000% just being a spin doctor. I know I'm going to stir the pot right before we go to locals, but just to give people a little bit of an incentive, it's 1000% just being a spin doctor. CNN is Catholic Answers. Catholic Answers is CNN. It is just one big.
I don't know. CNN has really cleaned up their act a lot lately. I mean, you might want to change that to MSNBC.
Maybe
I don't know.
Maybe Catholic Answers is worse.
You guys have to know.
Honestly,
I have to tell you guys a little behind the scenes, break down the fourth wall a little bit. In the green room before the show, I go, Joe, we're going to talk a little bit about Trent and Matt Fradd on the other side. I'm like, you don't have to come. He's like, I don't care. Let's go.
Nobody cares what I think. It's fine. It's all good.
Great. So, all right, guys, if not, here's the thing I will ask you guys. If you guys can't come to locals and support us, what I will ask is that you share the show. Like, you can't imagine how much it helps when you share the show on social media. So if you really can't afford to help us over on locals, shoot this out on Twitter, shoot it out on Facebook, shoot it out on wherever your social media presence is. Just getting people used to seeing our show and people tweeting it out and stuff, that really does help and gets people to check us out and give us a chance for the first time. So we could really use the help. Hit like, subscribe, and if you can, it's $5 a month. It's a cup of coffee a month. It's $5 for a cup of coffee now at this point. So help us out. I'm not a longshoreman. I don't make that kind of money, but we do need all the help we can get. So Crypto Ducket, thank you so much for all your help. I saw, what was it?
Andy Malone.
Andy Malone, thank you so much for your super chat. And we will see you guys on the other side. Take us out, Rob.